Jan,
Oh no,
how's it going?
it's
We
going
are
really great, man.
live.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's a good Wednesday. Um, well, here we are. This is stream number 2 in our deep dive series. Stream 1 was all about the foundational AI model companies, and now we're doing deep dives into individual companies. And we are starting with Perplexity, which I use every day. And as a matter of fact, I used it to generate the run of show for this event, which is pretty cool. Um, you guys, Soccer is pretty much just a wrapper on top of ChatGPT, right?
Yes, proudly. Yeah, we use a lot of AI. Last year I spent about 10 days just going insanely hard trying to figure out what we needed to do with AI. And right now, yeah, we use it a lot on the back end, sort of research workflows. Summarization is just like one of those AI use cases that's like working so perfectly right now. So we're using it for that. Also, taking interviews, taking research that we've done, and turning it into key bullets, key insights that we put in our emails. So yeah, ChatGPT wrapper, Claude wrapper, Gemini wrapper, whatever is the flavor of the moment.
Any Perplexity integrations?
We had Perplexity. We were using the Perplexity API for a while. We actually just launched a V2 of all of our company description fields on our website, which were crappy before, and now they're updated. But actually, we used GPT-4 with web search. Um,
Okay, nice. Is
so
that live? Live citations?
yeah, exactly. So something to discuss when we talk about competition.
Cool. All right. Well, let's dive in.
Sweet. I
You want to?
think we just gotta get that. There we go.
There we go.
There we are, looking
All
handsome.
right.
And then cool.
Cool. Well, let's start simple. For folks that are just tuning in, what is Perplexity, and generally, how does it differ from traditional search or chatbots?
Yeah, so Perplexity was founded 2022. Um, and fundamentally they think of themselves as an answer engine. So you got search engine, you type in a phrase, you get links. um, with the answer engine, with the Perplexity, you type in a question and then you get a direct answer. A full sentence or sentences with citations from the web. So under the hood, they started off using Bing search indexing to do this, and then now they use Brave, and then that web content gets scraped, turned into a LLM synthesized answer. Um, Perplexity a little bit more optimized for like longer search queries. So, like for example, if you want to know what movies are playing, you'd probably use Google, search movies near me. If you want to know, if you want to understand the use of parallelism in some particular movie from the 70s, you'd probably ask Perplexity because they could do a web search and produce a sort of coherent answer. Um, that's the sort of basic gist of it.
And Perplexity pivoted from using like a single model like GPT 3.5, and now they're multi-model. How does that position them against the vertical giants like Google or OpenAI? And a little side note here: I used to work at Google, and when I was thinking about leaving to join a startup, I wanted to go and check out the other teams. And one of the things that this was like 2014, 2015. Um, One of the other teams that I was looking at was within search, and it was this question answer service. I forgot exactly what they called it, but you would type in a question and it'd give you an answer. So it's pretty cool to see how like the way that they were doing that back then is so different than the way that LLMs enable this to work. But how does Perplexity kind of enable that today?
Yeah, so Perplexity is interesting. Like we've said this before, that they're not really an AI company, and they're not really a search company. So like I said, they use Brave and Bing for search. And then on the AI model side, like you said, now, these days you can use any variety of, frontier level AI models within Perplexity. Um, what they are is a product company, right? So they can sort of choose which AI models to use, which search index to use. And their advantage is basically that they can innovate much faster at the UX layer and the product layer, which we've seen them do. They've launched a lot of products, especially sort of Q4 2024 was very fast pace of product velocity. They launched this finance product, sort of Bloomberg for the public markets, Bloomberg for Perplexity, let's say. They launched a couple of shopping products. They launched Spaces. They launched this deep research product. So that's really been their core advantage, is that they just use whatever the best models are to an extent, on the unit economics side. We'll get into that. But and then on the search side, they don't really innovate there. They just kind of use the best available index, and they try to make the most compelling kind of product experience to interact with these AI models.
Got it. It seems that every foundational AI company, from ChatGPT to Claude, they're all monetizing through subscriptions. Is Perplexity just another tool that I add to my $20 a month subscription stack, or is there a different way that they make money?
Yeah, more or less. I think originally it was just kind of another tool, with the key difference that when they launched, there was no one else doing search on top of LLMs. Um,
Yeah,
and there are other competitors now, but one of the places where Perplexity really stood out early on, kind of going back to the product slide in a way, is that it was so fast. I mean, when you typed in a query on Perplexity, it was like it was insane how quickly all this was happening behind the scenes, the indexing and the search and the LLM synthesis of the content into an answer. So yeah, originally I think so, but they've started rolling out a few other things. So one is obviously $20 a month pro tier. They also have this enterprise tier as of last year, which is more designed for companies that want to be able to collaborate with teammates in Perplexity spaces, and have sort of Perplexity's web enabled LLM interface, but also attach it to local files, stuff in their Google Drive, or Microsoft OneDrive, that sort of thing. And then there's also this sort of other business. So if you think of $20 a month as for like the prosumer tier, enterprise for going higher, then at the free end, there's still a pretty significant amount of free access you get to Perplexity. The plan is to really monetize that with ads, which has started to roll out if you use it as a free user. Not really, to its full extent, but that's sort of the last part of the model. Capture this like potentially much higher intent search behavior, much more specific queries and like research queries, and monetize those with ads.
got it. What's the revenue looking like? You guys did a ton of research on this.
Yeah, it's been a very quick ramp. Obviously, end of 2023, going from 7 million to 63 at the end of last year, and then a couple weeks ago, CEO posted saying that they had reached 100 million annualized as of March. Some interesting dynamics there, actually. When we have slightly more data points internally, don't really fit on the graph, but their month over month growth rate slowed down a bit towards the end of 2024, from like roughly 20% month over month to like 12. And in the 3 months since 2024, it's accelerated again. So it's back up closer to 20.
I remember their CEO they positioned it against ad supported search, but now they're, I guess, thinking about doing ads. Isn't that a contradiction, or like, is this $50 CPM? Is that believable?
Yeah, I think it could hold. If it's truly high intent queries. I mean, you think about, there's a definite slice of Google queries that are worth that, and if they're capitalizing on stuff like financial related queries, or like high ticket value items. You think about things that you might research extensively before you buy them. Those might be much more valuable to an advertiser to get you to click on. On the sort of, is it a betrayal of the vision? I think the key thing for them is that the answers are never sort of affected by the ad. So the ad is always, as far as what I've seen, it's a uh, suggested like follow-up question that you can click on if you want. But the answers, they've been adamant, are not affected.
Smart. All right, let's talk fundraising. Um, they went from $520 million valuation to $9 billion in a year, and now they're rumored to be raising at $18 billion. What's driving all this? Like that's crazy.
Yeah, 180x is pretty nuts, even in AI. So I think it's worth looking at. But yeah, there was definitely, obviously, there was a phase where a lot of AI companies were getting really high valuations, but they are special in that, it feels like a lot of the AI valuations were somewhat moored in at least like the realities of unit economics. I think with Perplexity, there was a storyline of, you're disrupting Google search, which is like has been, was a startup idea for a while and then ceased to be one. Um, and they have sort of like positioned themselves most in the narrative as the ones who could do it. Um, and then I think part of it is too the sort of agility, the ability to index on any model, always have sort of the state of the art model powering the product. And I mean, the consumer adoption was, the adoption of a $20 a month Google alternative was really rapid. So, yeah.
Yeah. So granted that they're at this 180x multiple, what do you think they need to execute on the next, say, 12 to 18 months to justify that? Or is it all hype?
Yeah, I think to justify it, they have to keep the pace of revenue growth going from like the subscription growth and enterprise. The fact that it was slowing down end of 2020, 24, I think would be uh, concerning. But I think clearly they've reaccelerated at least a bit. So I think they need to show that continue to grow. Plus the advertising business has to take off. I mean, I haven't seen too many ads using Perplexity as a free
Yeah.
user. Um, so I think that's one key thing, like keep the growth going. I think like a secondary thing is kind of making sure there's some proprietary advantage
Yeah.
to what they're doing technology wise. Because now every LLM company, every foundation lab has a model with web search. And I think, Perplexity has custom models that they use. But, continuing to build out like proprietary models that are built for what Perplexity does, I think will be key. Yeah, I
And I
think those are
think,
probably the two things.
yeah, I think like one of the things that people mention about Perplexity is that they just move super fast. Like the velocity is crazy. They're pushing stuff out every couple of weeks. It seems like a big announcement. So I think if they continue doing that, they could get far enough ahead where no one can catch them. All right, Perplexity. They started out fully dependent on OpenAI and Bing. It seems. What does their tech stack look like now? And are they still vulnerable to platform lock-in?
Yeah. So they have Sonar. So this is their main sort of proprietary model, which they've had for a long time, um, and which I think they just shipped an update. Um, for a long time, their API was sort of a very deprioritized, but they sort of renovated it recently. Um, so I think that's a key. Having their own in-house model that they can train on, Perplexity interactions, but also, train in the direction of the kind of experience that they want to be having on the platform, I think is key. Um, they do still rely on, other web indexes. I think part of the vision that the CEO talked about in early interviews was about basically rebuilding all of the web searching, crawling infrastructure internally. So, the premise being that they could do it better with AI, with user data. I don't believe that's materialized. I know as of recently, they're still using Brave. So that might be, too big to chew off. But they're reliant there. Who knows what could happen? I mean, I know Anthropic's also using Brave, but there's some risk that Brave, tightens up the licensing or raises fees, that kind of thing. So with that in place, Sonar as a web search model is still dependent on the data that it can get from Brave or other
And
scrapers. So yeah.
and their Sonar model seems to be fast. How does that stack up against in real world search accuracy versus like a GPT-4 or Claude?
Yeah, from using it and looking at some of the benchmarks, the main thing it has going for it is the speed, which has been
Yeah,
really, like I mentioned, key from the beginning. It's just like very, very low latency. So it's super fast. And I think, especially if you're looking for factual queries, ironically, kind of like Google-ish queries, it's going to get you, generally to the right answer very fast. But it's a little bit less clear when you start looking at sort of more intensive research-based questions. So right now, I think, yeah, it's basically speed. Speed on sort of a simpler set of queries is where it's strongest.
interesting. All right, let's go on to competition. So OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, Microsoft, they're all moving into AI search. I actually spoke to an executive at one of these six companies like 6 months ago. And essentially he said Perplexity is not on their radar and they're trying to build all this stuff in-house. It seems like Perplexity could be an interesting acquisition target. What's Perplexity's actual edge in this space?
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely been talk of acquisitions of Perplexity by
Hmm.
several of the names in this space. I know there was, OpenAI, Perplexity talks, um, and a few others. I think the strength they have is the usage. I mean, from this graph on the right, obviously it's easy to poo-poo and say Perplexity has such a small, bar.
That's
But
opportunity.
the Google bar goes to almost 100 billion. So you have to rank it relative to that. Um, I think Perplexity's advantage now is more on sort of what you were just talking about. Being a product company, being able to ship things really fast. Um, they don't have to worry about sort of building it into a coherent experience like
Yeah.
ChatGPT or Claude. Kind of already has a reputation of being this multi-product suite where you're going to get sort of emerging product paradigms as soon as they're kind of like ready, as soon as they've been like thought up, and then you'll get the best models available to plug into them. So deep research gets launched by Gemini. The OpenAI's version comes out. Perplexity's comes out a day later or a day before. I don't even remember, but making these things available to people who aren't, paying $200 a month for a
Yeah.
ChatGPT membership and that sort of thing is powerful. Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, do you think them being better at these complex long queries, does that actually give them defensibility, or is that just temporary gap? I think you kind of answered that, unless you want to expand on it.
Yeah, you do see the other model companies getting better at this. I think, like, for example, Claude just added web search, so it's not quite um, at the level of a deep research. ChatGPT has this DeepSeek's, UI. If people are still using DeepSeek, does have this functionality. Actually, Grok too. I should have mentioned. Grok has sort of a deep researchy function. So, in the sense that those go towards higher value queries, I think it definitely lessens Perplexity's moat specifically on that. But um, as it pertains to like you know having a large number of users, which they do, and then being able to monetize those in other ways, being able to monetize them on ads, and like
Yeah.
these higher value subscriptions, I think is valuable. You're not going to see OpenAI probably doing ads, although Sam Altman's has been a little teasing about that.
Very quick tangential question. Um, deep research. We just did this series on AI, AI's top model. Sorry to throw this in, but I couldn't resist. Um, how does deep research compare across all the models?
Great question.
Especially because that's like what you guys do, and you could keep it short.
Yeah. Well, I haven't tried Gemini since the original, which I thought was, an impressive use of like Google's index because they would find 100 things, but it had easily, well, yeah, the results weren't great. Um,
Hmm.
Perplexities have not been great for me either, but it's much faster and much cheaper. So I would imagine you could build a workflow around that that would work. And then I think ChatGPT is just far and away has the best deep research product um, for a few reasons, but one I think we'll discuss later. So I'll save it. But essentially,
Go
it's
for it.
that they sort of built an entire architecture of models for um, for the specific use case. Um, yeah, I don't want to
Walter,
write.
maybe if deep research is good enough, why not?
Great
You
question.
can't replace Jan. You can't replace Jan, Walter.
We'll always need a talking head.
Yeah. All right, let's shift over. So Perplexity has 240,000 paying users. Ads are now in play, it seems. What does their business model look like end to end?
Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of a typical freemium SaaS business, right? You have a free version of the product which you can come in and use. Um, Limited number of queries. Then you get upsold to Pro at $20 a month in order to unlock a higher volume of usage. And actually, within the last few weeks, they they have removed the model selector from the free version. Um,
Mm,
so you come in as a free user, you can't just be like, I'm going to use Claude 3.7 Sonnet or O1, for all my like random queries. Um, as you might want to as a free user, why wouldn't you always use the best model?
yeah.
They've removed that, so now it sort of routes your request to the model that makes the most sense. Um, so you have to upgrade now for that. And then the next sort of step, if you want to, have spaces just for your company, for your organization that are, privacy protected, not going to be trained on, that kind of thing, that's a $40 a month. Um, and then like we said, we have ads. There's this sort of a new business around revenue share with publishers who aren't always, hyped to have their articles being summarized by an AI chatbot instead of having people go to their site. So those are really the primary streams.
How scalable do you think that prosumer model is versus like competitor like Glean or Hebia? I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. They're targeting enterprise, whereas Perplexity started with the consumer and moving into enterprise.
Yeah. So the nice thing about the prosumer biz is that obviously there's very little friction to getting people to put in their credit card for $20 a month. And by moving stuff into the pro from the free, they can start monetizing that more. Um, with respect to Glean, insofar as Perplexity is kind of going after the same market, Glean is doing AI search over all of your SaaS apps and tools and files. Perplexity is sort of moving in that direction with their enterprise product sales cycle. That's like 5-6 months long. Not atypical for a company trying to go enterprise. Um, High ACV, above 100K. Customer mix is like largely this like mid-market kind of tech companies. Um, so they are in a very different spot in terms of go-to-market. Perplexity can sort of benefits from that lower friction, um, but there's also the opportunity to sort of package up this enterprise search product potentially in a faster to deploy format. I think it's really hard for a few reasons, but um, yeah, potentially they have that opportunity.
Looks like we got a question from Jameson.
Nice.
Anecdotally, he paid for enterprise really just because he wanted to connect it to Google Drive. Are data connectors / MCP something they can do to stand out?
Yeah, I think that goes exactly to exactly to your question and what I was just saying. Um, like, most ChatGPT Claudes have some Google Drive basic, drag and drop integration, but being able to get Perplexity across, all of your kind of like key documents and apps is a huge opportunity. We talked about Glean before, and I think um, Glean spent years pre-AI just working on kind of this infrastructure, the plumbing of getting a reliable feed of data from
Yep.
all these SaaS apps. So I don't think uh, I think it's a tough problem, but we have seen with MCP or Model Context Protocol like a very interesting kind of potential paradigm where you don't have to do all this plumbing. You just have you take an API and just call it AI, and then you magically take stuff from app to app. Um, but yeah, it's early for that, definitely. But I think it could be really valuable, especially for companies that are not quite in that Glean size,
Yeah.
and then moving up from there.
Along those lines, so Perplexity acquired Carbon, which is a retrieval engine, and that connects external data sources like Notion and Google Docs to these large language models. And then they launched Enterprise Pro. Is Perplexity, are they serious about enterprise, or are they just like testing the water? What do you think?
I think they're serious insofar as they know that there's no moat in just doing LLM search.
Yeah.
So I think there's potential there for it to help them build a real moat. Kind of going back to what we just said, but being able to get data from other apps into Perplexity will be huge. I think the one kind of the sticking point, the thing that's going to be tricky is taking a business like Perplexity that's built around this like freemium
Yeah.
prosumer product, self-serve, and building the kind of muscle around like doing these enterprise deals, which obviously is a totally different sport. All the security, all the compliance stuff. Like AI search is really like a compliance nightmare in a lot of ways with like the
Yep.
access to data, hallucination, training. Um, so it's going to be, it's obviously tricky and probably means starting, SMB startup and up market in the future.
How so with this Carbon acquisition, does that actually give them that moat? And it seems like they are playing catch up to players like Glean in the enterprise stack. Glean knows how to do enterprise. They've been doing those sales for a long time. Is that just like one step toward it? And like, what actually is the moat there if they were to execute successfully?
Yeah, I think it's tough to say because it's tough to say there's a moat because you know, Glean is already in the space. Heavy is in the space. You have sort of like vertically integrated players doing this, like Harvey, et cetera, who, there's a heavy services component to this where companies like Glean are working closely with their customers to get set up and to make this actually work. So I think it's a sort of having integration with data sources is necessary but not sufficient. Um, and then just to respond to Jameson's great question about the browser, Perplexity is launching building a Chromium-based web browser with the
Hmm.
idea that it'll be agentic, um, which is something OpenAI has talked about doing, and others. Um, I think, yeah, I think so wanting it to be great, but being worried they'll screw it up is a valid um, perspective. It can seem like Perplexities with their product velocity, it can seem like they're kind of all over the place in terms of what they're launching. Um, but I think that's part and parcel of being like Sacra, GPT wrapper, and they're trying to sort of find a competitive, find that moat.
Touche. All right, let's talk partnerships. They have deals with Deutsche Telekom and SK Telecom, which reach over 300 million users. What made these telcos choose Perplexity over the incumbents?
Yeah, it's hard to know for sure. I haven't seen too much going deep on the structure of the deal, but most like just thinking in terms of what makes sense. I think you know doing a deal like this with OpenAI probably is only in the realm of Apple, which actually has to deal with OpenAI.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably an element of revenue sharing, kind of like a willingness to customize the experience for customers of these telecoms. Um, the telecom gets to brand or bundle the AI search however they want, probably, and then Google or OpenAI on the flip side would probably be harder to work with on that front. And Perplexity obviously is hungry for distribution. Per that graph, they still don't have anywhere near the search volume of a Google, and so doing these kinds of deals makes sense, especially to break out into like a wider consumer market.
Could you explain that a little bit more? Like, doesn't revenue sharing hurt their margins? And like, how much of that distribution do you think will actually convert into active users?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I think on the margins front, I think the one advantage is that they so it's not they're not necessarily operating at the cutting edge of AI capabilities right now. They sort of had the core product figured out in like 2022.
Yeah.
And if you use a cursor like an AI IDE, you're always going to go for the best model available, because any improvement in the AI quality is going to mean less time you spend coding and so forth. Same with like customer support. You would always want the best model. Whereas with Perplexity, I think on a phone format for a mass consumer, I think they can make pretty good use of the sort of auto, their custom small models that are cheaper to operate.
Yeah.
So that should help with margins. But yeah, it's hard to say. It's hard to say how the activation will look like. I mean, it'd be good to see the product and what it actually looks like in these
Yeah.
partnerships, what the Perplexity phone looks like. But obviously that would be you don't want it to just be like a vanity project.
Yeah. Very cool stuff. Let's talk about positioning. Um, you mentioned this before. Perplexity says it's a product company. It's not an AI company. What does that actually mean in practice?
Yeah, so like fundamentally it's that they're trying to do more work on proprietary AI models, but that's not really the core business. The core business is figuring out what are the use cases for the AI models that are really sticky and that will generate, either high volume of usage that they can sell ads into, or sort of high value of usage that they can sell subscriptions against. So that's what when you see them launch a finance product, shopping product, those are kind of two
Yeah.
ends of the spectrum, right? Like one, a finance dashboard. If Perplexity can become now the place where you go to learn about what's happening in the markets or follow companies rather than a Yahoo Finance, um, they can monetize that. Yeah, they can monetize that either through prosumer subscription or through ads. I mean, those valuable places to sell ads. Shopping is much the same way, where it's more likely to be advertising. But I think they're sort of, in a way, they're not going to be innovating on the LLM quality the way that OpenAI do or Gemini do, nor on the search index necessarily, but they can innovate on sort of go to market around different product features and getting engagement. So I think that's the
Yeah.
key thing.
It seems like that's a risk. It's like if Google or OpenAI vertically integrate, how does Perplexity actually avoid being replaced? And I think that kind of brings us to the next topic is like the upside. If everything goes right, what's like the best case scenario for Perplexity? And again, I think they seem like a great acquisition target, even at 18 billion for one of the big search companies or one of the big foundational model companies. What are they swinging for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it boils down to being the next Google search,
Yeah.
and really being this interface through which people ask questions of the internet. I mean, we've talked a lot about how other AI models have search, and that's true, but they're not focused on kind of the answer engine search case or use case, right? And it is meaningfully different. So that OpenAI or Gemini might bring in context from the web to supplement an answer, but Perplexity is focused 100% on this, sort of finding you the right answer to your question from the web. So I think if they keep that going and they can sort of own the space of the most complex queries, start capturing these high value verticals like finance and e-commerce, and keep consumer moment keep growing as a consumer focused business. I think they have a shot to get up to you know 100 million. Billion ARR. They hit 100 million.
Yep. And the downside of upside, the risks. Let's close on that. What are the biggest things that could actually go wrong?
Yeah. I mean, competition is a big one. I mean, Google, of course. Google's very weird with AI to me because I try Gemini's latest model. I'm convinced it's the best model for like coding and for a lot of like research summarization tasks. If you use Google's, the Google Suite AI tools, it's like a complete disaster. I mean, like nothing
Really?
ever works when I try to. I occasionally play with it in a Google Sheet or Google Doc, and I tell it to, make this shorter or whatever. I've never actually had it succeed. 3, 4, 5 months of trying. So, but, but, I think it's a sleeping giant situation, and obviously they've shown the fundamental ability to generate like build really great LLMs.
Yeah.
So they're also launching like recently into beta this like Perplexity like experience where you have a Google search interface and then you get an answer um, instead of links. So they're at least testing the waters. I think the theory was that they would never cannibalize the 10 blue
Yeah.
links and the search revenue, but they're clearly playing with it. So I think that's one big risk. Google. Um, Obviously, I think OpenAI too. I mean, ChatGPT has become synonymous with AI. It has search. So there's definitely an angle there. I think it kind of just means, are you going to pay $20 for OpenAI versus Perplexity? Potentially, if OpenAI has other things that you also want, which they're developing. I think competition is a big one, and just getting squeezed by other players with the same basic functionality.
And you touched on this before too, kind of the micro short-term level. Growth slowed from 20% to 12% month over month. What was the cause of that? Was it seasonal, or is there a signal that they're hitting their user acquisition limits?
Yeah, possibly it might be seasonal. I think from looking at trends data, there's a sort of drop off toward the end of the year. I think a lot of the usage of Perplexity is, um, college students. So when they go home for the summer, or sorry, like winter, uh, aren't doing as much searching. That's an element
Mm.
of it slowing down, and we've seen it pick back up uh, in 2025. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely a risk that they hit a ceiling with sort of like consumer willingness to pay $20 a month for search, um, and it's the same with Glean too. If you look at the enterprise angle, like
Interesting.
Glean hasn't really broken into the Fortune 500 at scale. They haven't really broken out of like the mid-market tech vertical at scale. So, there's a risk in the enterprise angle as well, where you want to get into big banks, and huge Fortune 500, 100 companies, but we haven't really seen that happen yet. So there's a ceiling risk there too.
And I know Perplexity, I don't know if OpenAI does this as well, but Perplexity is really big on giving universities like free access to this stuff. Um, I wonder how those. Do you know how those deals work? Like, are the companies or the universities paying money to Perplexity, or is it just a free kind of way to get the students hooked on it?
I don't think they're paying money. I could be wrong, but I have seen the same ones you have. Claude has a similar program. Yeah, Perplexity I think was free for all college students recently, but I think it is just get them in the habit. Get
Get
the
them
get
hooked on
the get the
phonics.
kids hooked, and then hit them with the auto model selector. Once they graduate.
Yeah. Good stuff, man. All right. I think we're going to move to Q&A. Let's see if we can get some questions out from social. They should land here if we have them. Otherwise,
You
in
can
the
just ask
meantime,
Perplexity for some questions.
yeah, that's right. And it's
Give
actually
me
funny. A
follow-ups.
lot of the questions I asked you, I just loaded in your deck, and it spit out some questions for me while we were doing this. So,
Oh, nice. Well, I was just typing in all your questions into ChatGPT really fast and getting answers on the fly. So
you are just a ChatGPT wrapper.
what can I say?
So, yeah. In the meantime, you want to talk a little bit, 30 seconds on Sacra, and I'll do 30 seconds on Augment.
Yeah, man. So yeah, Sacra, we're private markets research. We focus on high growth pre-IPO startups. Data, revenue data, valuation, fundraising, all that stuff, but also long form deep dives into companies. We send about 3 to 4 emails per week. So sign up for our newsletter and you'll be getting an onslaught of private markets insight, expert interviews, memos on different markets and companies, written by me and maybe with some AI help. So yeah, check it out.
Cool. And Augment is a marketplace where you can buy and sell shares in private companies. Perplexity, AI companies all included. You can check us out at augment.market. And we have a very deep integration with Sacra as well. So if you want to check out some of Sacra stuff on the companies that we have available, do it through us. All right, I think we might be having some technical difficulties on the social questions here. Maybe not.
Oh, this is a good point.
Why would I not use ChatGPT for everything? Jan just said so. Why not?
Yeah. I think you have to these days.
All right.
Yeah, it's amazing. Did you see Shopify Toby's memo to staff? He expects everyone to use AI by default at all times.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, like with like engineering interviews in particular, in colleges, initially the initial reaction was like, don't use AI, you got to write it yourself. And now everyone's kind of accepting it that this is around and it's an amplification tool rather than a cheating tool. And so, I mean, even us, we're like, you can use AI all you want in the interview because that's what you're probably going to be doing while you're working here. So, massive multiplier. And I just missed that social question. Did you get it?
So they asked, how do I know what questions should be for Perplexity versus Google or ChatGPT? It's a great question. So yeah, I personally, I think the way I think about it is I know what it takes. I know when I Google something, like I know if it's going to be a torturous process to find what I want. Like I just know the results are going to be meh. So I'll try Perplexity, or ChatGPT for those. I don't really differentiate too much because they just do the sort of hard work of instantly scraping, the top 10 results and generating an answer. But if I generally know what I'm looking for, I'll often use Google. The flip side is too, if I feel like I try Perplexity, and sometimes if you really want something specific, like some kind of insight or data point that is out there, I'll just skip right to Google and go through a few pages because sometimes the search index in Perplexity or ChatGPT isn't quite good enough. So like super focused, targeted stuff, I'll still go to Google myself.
I give you my answer too. If I need something like, I think the speed of these things are super relevant too. If it's a super simple question, I'll go to Google because it's just really fast. And if I generally know it's out there and I know exactly what I'm looking for, it's Google. I usually default to Perplexity, especially when I need references for something where I eventually need to go to a site because it's really easy to click on those. And then ChatGPT is for longer form stuff where I know I'm sitting in front of a computer doing stuff. Also, I don't know if people do this, but if I want to learn about a complex topic, I do this almost every day on my way home from work. Can be like between a 15-minute and a 40-minute drive. I'll put on ChatGPT voice mode and just talk to this AI that entire time. Sounds crazy, but it's actually incredible. It's a good use of time that I otherwise wouldn't have for kind of back and forth learning. So
yeah. Perplexity voice agent. It's a little slow. It's not high latency.
yeah,
It's not low latency. But I was like, my car wasn't starting, so I voice chatted with Perplexity, asking it, what I needed for this specific car model. Pretty nice. So definitely like voice mode too.
cool. All right. I think we're all wrapped up. Thanks a bunch, Jan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, and see you next time.